So this evening it could be called something eclectic and beautiful, or it could be called a bit of a hodgepodge of ideas. So you can tell me at the end which of those it turns out to be. It was just an idea to try and gather together a few ideas that we've kind of talked about separately on other occasions, really under this heading of prioritizing and time managing with the gospel in mind. So that's what it's about. First thing, what is your biggest challenge with the use of your time? Have a 1 minute talk to your neighbor and then shout up for me. There are notes, by the way, two-sided notes for this evening, which are similar to the PowerPoint, but not exactly the same, just to keep you alert. And if you're a child or someone who just likes doodling, there is a coloring sheet with a very significant verse and another very significant verse, both of them from Colossians, sort of connected with our topic. So if you want one of those, I've got one of the colouring ones here. And if any adults want the colouring ones, don't be ashamed to ask. And there are 10 felt tip pens here, which I bought from Select Store. They're of dubious quality, but it says they're washable, smooth ink. It just drew me in. Smooth ink. I thought, what is that like? Anyway, so I'm looking forward to any feedback if anyone does borrow those. So if any children want them, I'll put them just there, so you can just grab them at any time. So, have a chat with your neighbour for a moment about what's the biggest challenge to you with your use of time. And the second question, what is the most important use of your time, do you think? Okay? What is your biggest challenge with the use of your time? What is the most important use of your time? You're right. And try again.
Not watching telly.
Good one. That's a challenge. Anybody else want to speak into this? What's your biggest challenge? Okay, no one has any challenges to do with time. Let's go.
I sometimes feel that the economic imperative takes over and you start spending time doing things you feel are pointless sometimes just because you need to earn money, you know?
Okay.
And so in my head I'm like, I'd much rather be doing something else that I consider to be more purposeful. And yet I'm required to sit at this desk all day this week. I don't want
Right.
to, you know?
So the challenge is you're doing stuff you don't particularly want to do, but stuff that you have to do. Okay. Yeah, I get that. Hi.
My sisters.
Your sisters are the biggest challenge. In what sense are they a challenge? You've got to develop that now you've said it.
Because they are really annoying.
Okay. How does that challenge your use of time, though? Do they distract you from doing the things you'd like to do?
They just want to play with my friends and just
Okay. Well, that's quite a challenge. Thank you for that, being honest. Anybody else? Sorry, Matt. Two grumpy old men at the back. Yeah, it's like in Sesame Street. If anyone remembers that. Yeah.
Yeah, so Annabelle and I agreed screens. I'm more of a television, but she's more screens because of computers and apps and stuff.
Right.
But I think it's good as well. I think screen time and slobbing out, as we might call it in our house, can be beneficial. So it's not always bad.
Okay. So screens can be a challenge to your use of time. I won't pick on you, no. Okay. Interesting. Do you know, I thought I'd get more comments on this one. It's very interesting that. Is it like you're all sorted?
Ensuring that you're not lazy or selfish with your time. Or, I don't really get the question, but something about laziness and selfishness.
Okay. Procrastination. Thank you, Steve. And thank you for that feedback that it wasn't a good question. I'm renowned for not producing good questions.
I think other people's demands on your time.
Yes.
Big one.
Yeah, definitely. Good one. Like that.
So related to that is the giving time to the important non-urgent stuff or the important stuff that other people, not the family.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Doing the things that you think are important in the long term. Okay. I'm surprised none of you said just simply lack of it. The biggest challenge in my use of time is there's not enough of it. Or none of you said I'm not quick enough in the things that I do. Do you find that? Do you not find that you're slower than you want to be? Particularly doing things that have to be done, but maybe as Josh said, that you're not feeling like they're who you are. So it's kind of frustrating that it takes a lot of time to kind of work through that. There may be something that's important. I don't know. There's a wrong water bill that you've got or something, and you phone up the company and you waste a lot of time going through that, and you think, well, this is not who I am. This is not what I want to be doing. But I've just spent half an hour in a call center trying to get through to that, and so that can be frustrating. Okay, we're going to think about some practical issues, but also some kind of fundamental issues. Now, what is the most important use of your time? Just answer. You can give like a Sunday school answer if you want, or.
Yeah, I think most important use of your time is it's like use your time.
Okay. That's true. I like that. The only thing I would say is if you spend all your time planning and not doing, that is a problem. Not you personally, but as it's a problem. It's one of the bullets I've got a bit later on. But I get it. It's a good use of time, so it's important to plan. Yes, Noah? Reading the Bible is the most important use of your time. That's a good answer, I'm sure, and we'll think about that.
Building up the relationships with parents, relationships you have.
Okay. Building relationships, yeah?
Not so much
Who was she? She has her hand up. Listen to the Bible, that's good. Did someone just spill a drink? Okay. It looks like a crisis. You're all kind of looking to the floor as though there's an oil slick or something. Anyone else want to answer that? Okay. Is there an answer in Sermon on the Mount terms or anything? What do you think?
We mean like it's a complete waste of time to worry about tomorrow, something like that.
Well, that's part of the Sermon on the Mount, but that wasn't particularly the part I was thinking about.
I was actually going to say before that the most important use of your time is what you should be doing right now, which could be anything.
Yes.
It's just what should you be doing now is the best use of your time.
Yeah, I like that. Helpful. Anyone want to give me a Sermon on the Mount style answer? Okay. The greatest commandment is maybe an answer. The priority is loving God and loving our neighbor.
All those things that are blessed to those who
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Another word for looking for. Seeking. Yeah. And how do we seek where does that fall in set of priorities in the way Jesus puts it? First. So, as Matthew very rightly says, that's still got to shake down to what we actually should be doing at any time slot, any moment in time, what that looks like. But surely the overarching big narrative is to say, I'm seeking first, above everything else, God's kingdom. Isn't it? Or maybe it's not. Pardon? Quite so. But then you have to have a starting point to say, okay, as a Christian, however it works out, but I've got to have a starting point that says the very first thing I'm seeking, not the very first thing, the priority, the shaping narrative is the kingdom of God and kingdom values. Now you can bend that out of shape and say, okay, so that means I only need to go to church to do church stuff and nothing else matters. Or you say, God wants me to love my family, and so the only thing that matters is my family, or something like that. You can bend it out of shape, but if you don't bend it out of shape, it's a brilliant thing to always come back to say, okay, how is this seeking first God's kingdom and not worrying about things that I have no control over, that God will provide for me if I'm seeking his kingdom first? So, if that's so, just sort of doodling on in your heads or on a bit of paper, just try and think about some godly priorities. So list some godly priorities. Anything, just off the top of your head. If you're seeking first God's kingdom, what does that look like in terms of priorities? Things that would be important. It's on the sheet there. It's on the kind of the fourth bullet, for want of a better word. List some godly priorities. And it says, how does your current use of time reflect those? So a godly priority might be praying, just to give you a really easy one. Prayer. That's a godly priority, isn't it? So you can list that one. List something else. In a minute. Just write them down. No, sorry. Don't think so. What made you think that? I'm all right. I'm running around. Okay, it should be really straightforward. It's just how it drills down into real life. But shout out, some hands up for some godly priorities.
We do the devotional every day.
Okay.
We pray every day and we talk about our worries so we don't have to keep on thinking about it endlessly.
Brilliant. That's really good. Thank you for that.
To help others grow in their faith.
Okay, that's a good godly priority, biblical priority. You were scratching your head and it was like you were voting, James. No. Easy ones, just, you know.
To bring up your children.
Like, yes, brilliant, yeah. Yes,
To be good witnesses, and specifically Annabelle said to me to not act like you know everything.
yes. Was that to you or? Meeting with God's people. Say it again for the microphone. There's about 10,000 people who listen to this recording every week. Yes, Emily. What if I threw it? I knew you'd do it. To let God be in control of your life. The lordship of God, the kingship of God over your life, really important priority.
Praise and worship.
Yeah, praise and worship. To get sufficient rest, because of the biblical principles of work and rest, which are on the handout, but we almost certainly won't get to them, but they're stuff that we did at the beginning of the year anyway, and in the Humanity series. Kind of related to some of the comments earlier to do with family. I can't remember whether we had one about family. Did we? Yes, just about relationships. Yeah, providing for your family, looking after your family. I think we had about teaching our family earlier. Oh yeah, Mia said that's right. So there are all these things and probably quite a lot more that you could think about. The thing is, we can all say those because we know they're good answers and they're possibly the right answers that we should be saying. The question is, if those are our priorities, how does that actually look like? What does that actually look like? And in a way, time planning is a sort of an exercise over here that certain people in certain companies have to study at various times because they're not being very efficient. So you could say time planning is a totally kind of secular idea, but actually, time planning is a very, very biblical idea. Because really, time planning is about implementing our priorities. And the first step in any kind of planning your life, planning what you're going to do with your time, what you're going to do when you get up in the morning, what structure you put in place so you know what you're going to do when you get up in the morning, and then what in the moment decisions that you make, it's always, always, always about priorities. Now, that's not to say you can always control priorities, but it's always about making priority decisions and acting on those. It's dynamic. You can make a priority decision that then gets changed, but at least you made it in the first place. Caroline and I were sitting down last night, and for some, I was going to say well-earned, but that sounds rather pompous, so I won't. Some rest that wasn't at all deserved. It was a gracious gift of God to us. So there we were, sitting down to watch a film. So we've made our priority. It's a very interesting film, by the way, which I mentioned to a couple of people this morning called I can't remember what it's called. What's it called? Private Life, which is all about IVF and fertility treatment and so forth. Really challenging. Anyway, so there we were, and my mum phones, say that she's not very well and she's at a friend's house and she needs taking. So we're not slaves to our priorities in that we say, okay, look, I made a plan, I'm helping this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and now I'm having my well-earned rest time and this is my plan. So you've interrupted my plan, mother dear, and you can wait there until my plan has been executed fully till 10 o'clock. So plans can be changed, but if you don't have a plan in the first place, you've got nothing to base any decisions on. So you need a plan. And the thing which I'm sure I've said in other courses that I've done, but remember that every time you say yes to something, what are you saying to something else? No. It's such a simple but kind of obvious thing. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to a whole load of other. Why are you laughing, Caroline? Yeah. Yes. Just be thankful you're not actually my wife. Caroline is thankful she's my wife most days. But yeah, every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else, which is quite sort of both liberating and challenging, because sometimes you think when you're saying yes to something, you're just saying yes to something. Isn't that a good idea? What you're actually doing is saying no to a whole load of other things that you could be doing instead. Actually, an infinite number of other things possibly that you could be doing instead. So priorities are really, really important and will shape your plans. We're going to think about plans in just a minute, but if you don't get the first bit right, which is what are my priorities, then you can't kind of shape your plans. So a good priority might be something like this: to have a living relationship with God through Christ, to be praying, to be listening to his word, to be meditating, to be leading our families well, to serve and love the church, to serve and love our family, to tell people the gospel, and all of the other things that you said. And when you're in the middle of the week, it's worth always reflecting on, okay, what I'm doing right now, does that really reflect those priorities? And there's what you might call big life priorities, and then there's in the moment kind of priority setting and doing. So the example I gave last night was a kind of in the moment thing, and we make lots of those. So we have some what you might call free time, and you make a decision what to do, or there's some activity that's just going on this week, and you decide, yeah, I'm going to do that, that's fine, and everything else. And then you make big structural priority decisions, don't you? Where you say, I'm going to take this job that involves a 3-hour per day commute. That's a decision on what's important to you, what you decided you have to do in order to provide for your family or further your career. And that's a decision you made, and that has implications. And those are not in-the-moment implications. Those are everyday implications that will change the structure of your life. You decide to start leading a church or to stop leading a church. You decide to take on a ministry in the church or to stop doing that. Those are big priority decisions that then have an impact on every week. Can you see the difference? There's kind of in-the-moment decisions, and then there's big structural decisions. And sometimes we're struggling in the moment because we made wrong, maybe for good reasons at the time, but we made big structural decisions that are not really helping us in our kind of in the moment what we want to do. Okay. There's some diagnostic questions. Okay, now we'll do the first 2 bullet points first, and then we'll do the diagnostic questions. So we're into priorities, biblical perspectives. And I've used half an hour, and we've hardly got into bullet point number 1, but it's all right. It's okay, I have a plan. So the 2 kind of big things are to say our relationship through Christ shapes everything. So that's seeking first his kingdom and his righteousness. We always want to please him, Colossians 1:9 and following. So in all that we do, it's on the colouring verse for the children, to live a life worthy of the Lord and to please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God. That's Colossians 9 and following through to 11. So that's our big priority. But Colossians also helps us when we realize that all that we're doing can be working for the Lord. So although that our big priority is living a life worthy of the Lord and pleasing him in every way and bearing fruit, that fruit can be born in all kinds of contexts, in our work, in our family, even in our leisure activities, in our serving in the church, in our evangelism. All those things are ways in which we can bear fruit. So we've got to think the big priority is seeking first his kingdom. The overarching goal is to be pleasing him in all I'm doing. I'm not saying, well, I'm seeking first his kingdom, and now I'm going to have some non-kingdom time. Because we can sometimes think like that, can't we? We can think, okay, I'm seeking first his kingdom, I'm giving a priority to God and God's stuff, and now I'm having me time over here. If you really want to serve God, there's no such thing as me time. There's leisure time, loving God, serving God, enjoying God, sitting down, watching a film, kicking back, having some Diet Coke, which came from my house this evening, that one, because I forgot to buy any drinks. You can enjoy those things. But it's never me time. It's always God glorifying time, even in the leisure, even in the kicking back. Okay, anyone want to speak into that before I go on a bit more? Anyone want to make any comments? Okay, because you're all worried about, how's he going to get through all this? So just some diagnostic questions. I'm just going to read them out. We're not going to discuss them in any great detail. It's always good to ask some questions, to say the big headline one, which is, does my program, it's a bit of a businessy way of looking at it, but does my plan for what I'm going to do in the next few days, in the next few years, does it reflect my God-honoring priorities? So I think prayer is important. Do I allocate in my life any time for prayer? I think gathering with God's people is important. Do the choices I've made in my life mean that it's really difficult for me to do that? And so on. So do I need to make, second bullet, any structural changes in my life to better reflect my priorities? By structural changes, I mean kind of changing the way you're living your life every day. Not in-the-moment decisions like, oh, I better read my Bible now. It's like big decisions like, I better plan to do something completely different in order that I can read my Bible now. Do I need to do less work or less organized leisure activities or less church work? Sorry, the punctuation's not right. In order to give time to serving Christ, serving other people, and reflecting and worship. So it could be those kind of structural changes to do with, do I need to change what I'm doing in the church, serving? Do I need to change what I'm working at? Do I need to stop a leisure activity because it's actually eating up so much time that I can't actually serve in all the other ways that I want to serve and I know I should be serving? So those things to think about. Am I giving enough time to the gathering of God's people? Am I making myself available to serve without overloading myself in the church? So those are some questions. So you drill down from those questions. You say, okay, I've got all these questions to answer, and I've got these big priorities, and I know I can do everything for God, but in practice I've got to do something. So what am I going to do now? So we need to make plans about our use of time. I've just given a few texts there, but the Proverbs texts are about those who plan prudently. The plans of the diligent, Proverbs 21:5, lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty. Reflection, planning, is not just a non-Christian common sense thing. It's a biblical thing, because we need to plan in order to then shape what we do. Okay. Should we talk about some practical advice? I've got some. You're supposed to say, yeah, of course we do. I've been forgetting to advance this. I could advance this a bit, couldn't I? That would be helpful. Yeah, done all those. Okay. Now, what we need to remember when we come to actually deciding what we're going to do with our time is that we've not now moved off the biblical. Like the biblical was seek first God's kingdom, and then now we're in our domain. Okay, I understand this. I understand how to use time. I understand time units. I understand, what to do. I understand the physicality of it. No. Actually, whatever we're doing, it's all in God's domain, and actually, all wisdom is God's wisdom. So, if there's a piece of wisdom that is it's really helpful to only handle a piece of paper once, to handle an email once, to deal with a phone call once. If that's a piece of biblical wisdom, that's a piece of wisdom. That's God's wisdom. Even though there's not like a command in the Bible that says, make sure you only handle an email once or something like that. But it's all God's wisdom because it's all about applying our minds, but with purpose to say, I'm doing this not so I'm like a slick time manager so I can have more time to veg out, but it's so I'm a good steward of the time God's given me. I'm going to take all the wisdom that God has given me as a human being, and I'm going to use it, and I'm actually going to learn from other people who've thought about how I best use my time. What we're really doing is just discovering how the world works, and that's a good thing. Psalm 95 teaches us to number our days. If you look at the noble wife in Proverbs 31, what's remarkable about her, amongst many other things, is how much she crams into her life. And you think, she must be a kind of busy person, but I don't know, she just seems quite chilled in that description. Because because she's a planner. She's using all the wisdom God's given her to do loads of stuff, but to kind of work it all through in a way that doesn't seem to be that stressful. There's a saying that I think my father used to say, but it's a very common one, which is, if you want something done, ask a busy man. And I think that reflects the fact that the people who are most useful are the people who do plan. And they are quite busy, but they're actually, because they have a plan, they're able to flex around that plan without the whole thing collapsing. And the thing is, we can say, okay, now I've got these biblical priorities, and I'm going to make all those decisions in the moment, and everything will be fine. But we're not that good. We're not that good that we'll always make the right decisions. We're not that good to say, well, I just want to be dynamic. You know, I love God and I love people, and it's all just going to work out all right. I'm just going to see what comes up. I'm just going to see which way the wind blows, just see what happens, and I'm just going to follow it. That's good sometimes, but mostly it's not good, because there's a whole trail of people around us who will be affected by our wind-blown selves wandering around the place. My observation is that in the end, laziness in planning brings its own stress. It brings its own penalties, which doesn't even allow us to achieve what we wanted to achieve out of it, which was a peaceful life. Unless we kind of separate ourselves off from everyone else in the Christian community or in our family, generally speaking, being lazy about planning and prioritizing has such an impact on other people that it eventually has an impact on us and makes us very unhappy and stressed. So, those are some things by way of advice going in. I could say a lot more, but I'm just going to hurry. I think the point is really that our choices always have consequences. Planning is not the same as listing, by the way. Some people think, well, I've got these godly priorities, and what I need to do is just kind of list everything out and then work through the list. It's even more than listing and prioritizing. It's actually working out both what is really important and how am I going to do the things that are really important, and how am I going to sacrifice the things that are not that important and that I just can't do, because I've only got one life that God has given me with 24 hours in each day. So planning is not the same as listing. I think structural and seasonal overloads I've spoken about already, really, to do with there are things that are just in the moment. There are things that are more structural where we've made decisions. Just another piece of wisdom from observing the world is that our plans are always optimistic because of our pride. This is not just true in business, but it certainly is true in business. You ask anyone who's managed any project, anytime, anywhere, and they will tell you that people are always optimistic about how quickly they can do a task, almost always over-optimistic. Whether they're writing software or whether they're putting plasterboard up in big structures, they're almost always optimistic in how fast they can do things. We do that. Just kind of think of the last time when someone said to you, your wife or husband or children or someone else who's in your house, and says, okay, how long are you going to be? You're just doing a task, and they say, how long are you going to be? And you say, I'm just going to be a couple of minutes. Have you ever been a couple of minutes? Almost always it's longer than that, isn't it? Because of our pride, we always think we can do things quicker than we actually can. So that's something to plan in and to be humble about. Don't spend longer planning than living. That was what I mentioned when I was talking with Simon just now. Make your plans your servant, not your master. And remember that having made all these plans, it's all subject to God's will. Okay, some popular myths we're going to talk about, and then we're going to fast forward to the scenarios pretty quick, I think. Popular myths are that you can multitask. No one can multitask. Not a woman, not a man, not an orangutan. Nothing can multitask. You will find it very hard to even, rub your stomach and pat your head or whatever it is, let alone to genuinely multitask. Some people are better at switch tasking, as it's called, which is doing one thing, switching to another, and doing back and switching back. And so you can switch task, but you can never truly multitask. And if you think you can, it often leads to problems. And normally, one or other of the things that you're trying to multitask in suffers. The other popular myth, which we all believe, is that time is elastic. We all kind of have this belief that somehow we can bend time. We wouldn't sort of articulate that because we know it kind of advances at the same time, but we kind of have this feeling that somehow we can either hurry up time or we can slow down time or we can somehow affect time. The other popular myth, which I think is quite common, and I do it all the time, is to say this: if only I had one more hour each day, everything would be fine. You ever said that? If only I had just one more hour each day, if only I'd been allowed one more hour to do that task, everything would be fine. Almost always that's a foolish thing to think. Because the hour wouldn't be enough, and because the reason that you're feeling like that is probably because there's something structural, some whole set of priority decisions you've made that have all compounded themselves to you being where you are. I'm only chuckling because this is my life sometimes. The other popular myth is that it's easy for everybody else. It's just me that has a problem with this. Everybody has a problem with time management in some way or other. Everybody has a problem with both setting priorities but also executing priorities. So those are some of the popular myths. Some advice as we just continue through these few practical things is take advice from other people on how they set priorities, how they use their time. Take advice from older people who perhaps have been in both business and serving in the church, and say, well, how did you set priorities? Where did you think you went wrong? You could have done better. Where do you think it kind of worked out well? It'd be great for some of the older people in the church to be asked that, to ask people who are my age, who are older than you, in a lot of cases, kind of how it's worked out so far. Because we do have some experience of that, and sometimes that experience is bad experience, where we've made wrong priority decisions, and that's kind of cashed out in our lives. So do take advice from others. Actually talk to people about, how do you set priorities? How did you find time to do this or that? How did you manage to serve, or was that too much, and all those kind of things. Avoid unnecessary meetings. It was kind of a statement that you put in if you're doing this in a sort of business class or something else, but I thought it really does apply to church, because many of you lead ministries of various kinds, about thinking for every time you gather for particularly a sort of planning related meeting, just make sure that it's important and necessary and it has a purpose and it achieves the purpose for which it was held. So avoid unnecessary ones. Don't be a grumpy person who says they're coming and then doesn't come because they think it's a waste of time. If you think it's a waste of time, then articulate that and try and improve the meeting. I know you can be too kind of legalistic about it, but if you've got a church-related meeting, a ministry-related meeting, just show up on time. Because if you don't show up on time, do you know what it says? It says, you tell me what it says. My time is worth your more time. Now, this is like the Pharisee and the sinner here. So I'm the hypocrite, okay? Because I, particularly before I was leading a church, was never the person, because I'm always trying to cram a lot into life, and so I was never the person who'd be here on time for the sort of gatherings of the church, or rather I was the person who'd be here on time, which meant on time, like 10:30 walking through the door, because that's really efficient, isn't it? So there is a degree of hypocrisy in this, but you do learn, and it depends on the context. There are some things that you can turn up late for, weddings, funerals, that sort of thing. But that was a joke. But there are some things where it's not flexible and there's not a kind of understanding. And if I'm meeting Mark Ventham on a Wednesday afternoon, we kind of say about 3:30, and we kind of know that both of us are doing stuff, and we'll just be doing stuff until the other person shows up. If I'm meeting him to catch a bus, train, or go to a meeting somewhere else, and he's kind of standing in the high street in the cold, that's different, isn't it? Because I'm now saying my time is more important. You can get as cold as you like, and I'll just come along when I feel like, when I finish what I'm doing over here. So for any meetings, for any gatherings, for any appointments, think carefully about the impact of not showing up. That was a bit of an aside, but it was probably worth talking about. Think about automating repetitive tasks. Consider delegation in what you do. Is there anything you can do in serving in the church? Anything you can do in serving in the home where you can delegate? Some of you have children you can delegate tasks to. You can talk, if you're married, with your spouse about how that kind of works out. I've already said it before, actually, but try and handle paperwork or emails only once. That's a really important thing, I think. If it's at all possible, we can talk about that in a minute. Designate uninterruptible time for tasks requiring concentration. And you might think, well, that's just for very few people, but it applies to a whole load of things. If you want to sit down and read the Bible, make sure your phone's not going to interrupt you. Make sure it's a time when you're not going to get interrupted in other ways. So that works for that. If you're going to plan, and quite a lot of you here tonight do Bible talks of some sort. If you're going to plan and sit down to do that, make sure it's uninterruptible time, because you will do the best job in anything that's a sort of creative use of your mind in applying the Bible. You'll do the best job of it if you're not interrupted. Because the way our brains work, it's almost like you gain momentum. It's almost like there's kind of neurons that you're normally firing on a number, and you start to think about a Bible talk or whatever, and it's as though they kind of exponentially multiply, and the more you can concentrate, and there is a limit to it, you're not all geniuses, but the more you can concentrate, the more neurons that start firing. And if you keep interrupting, you only get up to about 100 neurons, and they all die again, you're back to your 10, and then you get up to 100 again, you're back to, but if you really concentrate for like half an hour without interruption, you've got like 1,000 or 10,000 all going, thinking of ideas, how you can apply this Bible and how that works, and that sort of thing. So, but you've got a plan for that to happen. Otherwise, it ain't going to happen, is it? So designate uninterruptible time and find out when you work best. If you've got something to prepare, if you want to just read the Bible on your own, then figure out when are the times you're likely to better concentrate on that. For some of us, and I've always tried to beat this, but it's really, really hard to do sit-down creative work about 2:30 on any afternoon. It's really hard to do that. So you kind of just accept that you'll just work really slowly at that point, and so it's better to do something else. Or so there are good times when we work. Some of us are good at waking up in the morning, being able to read the Bible usefully. Some of us aren't. Some of us are really good about when the kids are in bed or whatever, and it's now sort of 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Suddenly we're on fire, and we are quite good at both being able to either read the Bible or plan a talk or plan some other thing or do some other thing and work out, okay, this is how I work. This is good, and I need to go with the grain of who I am. Okay. I'm going to quickly flick these ones, and then we're going to do some of the scenarios for the remaining time we have, I think, because I think they'll be the most useful in trying to work this through. So in thinking of some of the priorities, I just wanted to kind of overview some key areas. If you think, well, what's my life made up of? Well, there's my home life, there's my marriage and my family, which will need time, input. Where we live at home is probably the most testing place for the gospel. It's where our most powerful gospel witness. It's the most damaging area to the gospel as well, if we don't witness well in that area. So it's crucial, it's key. Particularly if we're parents, we have obligations to provide and to nurture and to train and to love. But we also recognize that home life can become an idol. What do we do in church as we want to serve one another and use the gifts God's given us? Ephesians 4. It's a place where we're going to be worshiping and learning and praying and serving and being part of the body, part of the family. So church is a whole area. So I've got my family life and I've got my church life, and I've got these big kingdom priorities, and I've got to figure out of all those things how I'm going to do those things in a way that honors God. I'm going to be super quick for this because this is basically a collection of the slides that we used when we were looking at the Humanities series at Creation at Work. But just to remind ourselves, at the fundamental level, we are created to work as God works, and we are commanded to work, and the Bible commends hard work. Adam and Eve are given this task to subdue and to rule. It's the so-called creation mandate, and to discover, to categorize, and to sing, and so forth. So all the creative things that we do, and all the subduing things that we do, are under this creation mandate. So we're created to work and to do useful work, but there's also the curse of work, that we can worship work itself. I don't know how that bit got in there. That was a bit of my notes. But we work selfishly to please ourselves. We worship what work brings, the money that it brings. We become materialistic. We become greedy. We compete. We're sometimes dishonest. The work is cursed in that creation fights back, that the stuff we do is not as efficient as it ought to be, and crops regrow, and so crops don't grow, and rust never sleeps, and so forth. And we have a feeling sometimes that work is ultimately pointless. So work is cursed. But ultimately, we redeem work by understanding how we can serve God in the moment now, but understanding that in the new creation, we're going to delight in serving God. So we're going to flick over those. Work and rest. The Bible commands rest as well as work, and rest was part of the Old Testament covenant, but it's also what we need to reflect in the new covenant, that we're commanded to rest. There's a pattern for resting, and we need to reflect that too. Okay, right. What I wanted to do with the rest of the time is to think about 6 scenarios. They're not brilliant, but I think they kind of allow us to talk a little bit about the issue. So I've got 6 scenarios, which are basically kind of, here's a situation, and there's a series of questions, kind of, what should I do about it? And I think probably it'd be good if we kind of got roughly three groups kind of people here. So if, roughly speaking, are you capable of this? That 1 and 2, kind of you guys there, sort of talking with whoever you want to talk to, look at, and then 3 and 4, the middle kind of area, look at, and 5 and 6, this group over here, look at. But if you want to look at the other ones, that's fine. Let's give ourselves 10 minutes to talk about those scenarios and say what the principles are, and then we'll have 10 or 15 minutes to discuss it together. very simplistic, and they are not trying to make any particular points. They were just trying to kind of tease out some of the principles in the area of kind of home life and work life and church life and how we make those kind of decisions. So just so no one gets missed off, if we do scenario 1, then we'll flip to 3. So scenario 1 is 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Why did I pick Tuesday? I'm still at work. There's an important project finishing with deadlines. My work involves long hours. It's very unpredictable. There are often deadlines. I haven't seen my spouse for a few days. Should I plan to get home just in time for community groups because church and gathering is a priority for me? Should I keep working till the job is done because work is a priority to me and I've got to serve my boss and I've got to be diligent and integrity is important and doing what I said I was going to do is important? Or do I go home right now and see my family because my family is the most important thing to me? So what are you going to do, guys? Guys is a generic term for both males and females in Graham language.
I think like a good preface for the answer is to say that we thought that
Yeah, keep going.
I think that a good preface is that any one of those three could be valid in the moment decisions.
Yep.
Although repetitive or a regular problem might indicate there's a structural problem and there will be structural solutions. But any one of those three could be okay in the moment, but then there are other ideas about what you might want to do.
Okay, that's good. Anybody else in that group want to hand the mic to anyone else who wants to speak into that? Okay, so any of those might be right in the moment. So what are you going to do about the structure then? Where is it just to do with the repetition or what? Well, is there something structurally wrong that means you're stressed because you're trying to juggle 3 things on an evening and you're not quite sure which to do? Work, church-related, home-related. Yeah, well, there's the priority to say, okay, in the moment, what decision do I make? What might influence your decision? Let's forget the structural, because that might be a bit... We're going to do the structure in a sec. What might influence your decision of the in the moment? The context, yeah. Yeah, how important is the deadline? Pardon? Yeah, the details of the situation. How important is the deadline? What have I actually committed to? Will it make any difference if I stay at work? I know it feels like it will, but it probably won't because the deadline probably not is going to be met. Am I idolizing my work? Am I idolizing the that's not the word anyway. The applause of other people is so. So although any of those decisions might be right, any of those decisions might also be wrong because we're staying on for the wrong reasons. What else in the details might influence? How things are at home, yes, the degree to which. So I might not have, what have I said there? You haven't seen your spouse for a proper talk in a few days. For some of you, that's ecstasy. No, some of you, that's, I'm just joking. Please don't take it all as very serious. But, you know, it depends on the quality of the relationship at that point. You know, have I been neglecting my spouse in some way, or is it just the fact that we haven't spoken for 2 or 3 days, but it's fine in the overall how our relationship is, and we understand what we're doing, and we understand that this is a season where this is happening. So lots of questions about what exactly will be the impact on my family if I don't go. What to do with the church and community group? You haven't been for a while, might be a decision that influences. Say, okay, what else? There's a sort of consumer decision and there's a kind of community decision. Yeah, so the community decision is how, well, actually, when you said fellowship, it may have been a consumer decision to say, I need some fellowship. But the community decision might be, I'm part of that group and they rely on me to show up and to give some answers and to contribute. So it's about that as much as it is about how I might benefit from it. It's not wrong to say how I might benefit. This was a really important sermon on Sunday. This is a community group where we're discussing it. It would be really beneficial to me to really kind of ground that in my life. So it's not wrong to say that. That's not selfish. But it's also worth thinking about, what's the impact if I don't turn up? You know, I know so-and-so's not there that week, and I know so-and-so, and it's going to be a bit creaky, and I know how that's a bit awkward. So just maybe I need to factor that in. I'm sure you guys think about all these things, but those are then priority decisions, aren't they? So I absolutely agree with you. Either of those three could be right. But in the moment, you have to kind of think about the context in a bit more detail. But structurally, you might say, am I committing to this community group and actually I can never make it? So I need to think about other ways to fellowship. That might be a structural change you make. So I just can't do it. I just cannot do it. It's killing me. Or you say, I need to either get a job or I need to get an arrangement with my boss where I am allowed to go in time that I can go home, I can consume something in slightly longer than 30 seconds and then go out. Or something else. Those are the structural things. I mean, where you actually change job, timings, life, not family, but you know what I mean. You know, what goes on in the family. Okay, just so we don't run out of time completely. This is family related as well. I have a young family who are quite demanding. I've been asked to take on a new ministry in church. It would take up a few hours a week. How do I decide whether to say yes or no? So this would have been the middle group, wasn't it, that did that one? Thank you. Anyone in the middle group wants to speak to that? About whether you'd say yes or no?
We talked about what someone's view of what quite demanding might be, but that didn't necessarily change the principle of saying yes or no. So that actually, Adam made a good point about thinking first and foremost, are you serving your family, your demanding family well in the first place?
Yep.
But actually, you might think it through and realise that you have got 1 or 2 hours, and he said that might actually then impact you to be caring for your demanding family in perhaps a slightly tighter, better way because you've got some responsibility. You need God's wisdom on this one. On any decision.
You do. That's certainly true.
I think my thoughts from the discussion were, I think it would be down to a family working that out.
Yes.
Themselves and having to work out what the demands of that family are in that season. And actually, because if they're just exhausted because their family's demanding, maybe there's changes they need to make which mean that they might be able to serve, but actually it might not be right in that season because their time is better spent tending to their demanding family.
That's helpful. Sorry. Yeah, don't get too carried away with my word demanding. Did you want to say something, Nick? No, okay. Yes, of course you can.
Only it also depends when it is.
Yes.
And whether that's a flexible few hours or like could take 1, could take 20.
Absolutely, yeah. The impact on family of that and working it through with a family, really important point, Katura.
Like your community group, whether you should go or not, it's depending on the need of you being there.
Yeah.
Is anybody else in the church who could do it? Is it an essential ministry? Is it like not essential, decorating the churches? So it depends on, like, it's not just your situation, it's the church's situation, it's the need as much as the circumstances.
Yeah. I think to evaluate that, though, you need to discuss with the people who've asked you to serve in a particular way, rather than making a decision about this ministry is not important, or there are lots of other people who could do this. Sometimes my observation is sometimes people in the church who are asked to do something, they say no because they think someone else will do it, or they think someone else is better than them. So dialogue is always really helpful.
Yeah, but in context of people saying whether your family should sacrifice your time,
Yeah.
it's like, well, how much is it needed? If your family need you, and it's like it's going to be difficult, but darling, I think it's worth it because there's no one else who can lift that many chairs and stack them, or whether there's no one else to preach on a Sunday.
Quite so, yes.
You know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean, but I'm just saying most of us as church members are not capable of making that decision without some discussion with the people who've asked you to say, so how important is this, and how many other people could do this, and why are you asking me? So I'm absolutely agreeing with you that if our family are going to have to sacrifice us in some way, it's really important that we understand that it is valuable. But if someone's asked you to do a ministry, it's worth kind of going back to them and saying, I don't think it's that important. So try and explain to me why it is, because that's what you're saying, right? You're saying this is not that important, so I'm not going to make a sacrifice, darling.
No,
No.
I wasn't actually saying. I was saying that it could be that the conclusion reaches you should do it, even though it's a massive sacrifice for the family.
Yes, yeah.
I think you're taking it negatively because your experience is people say no to ministry.
Yeah, probably. But also, I'm just saying could reach that decision
Collectively.
having had the discussion. You still might decide not to, or you might decide to. I'm just saying most of us haven't always got enough information.
Sorry, we did discuss this, but just for me, it's quite a good one where you get advice from an older Christian, as in like somebody, if you are that person in a demanding family, somebody who's been there before to kind of talk it through, because sometimes that can bring
Definitely,
different
yeah.
perspective.
That's helpful, thank you. You didn't discuss that one because you did 4? Which one did you do? Okay, but you didn't do 3? Okay. Oh, you mean you didn't discuss it as in that's not something you said in the group, it's something you just thought of? Okay, that confused me. Am I doing this right? 5 over here, soon to be retired, blah, blah, blah. Anything you want to say about that?
I wrote some notes down, just really picking up the thoughts of everybody. Not in any particular order, sorry about that. Finding out where is the need, balancing it with witnessing the gospel to non-believing friends, potentially thinking about also growing as a believer, not just staying static, and maybe something like a lot of people do the SGP course in their retirement, and so that's a valid point that was made. Be realistic about your energy levels, and think also that there is time and purpose to resting at that time and that age as well. And it's better to do one thing well that uses your gifts than spread yourself too thinly and not use your gifts well.
Okay, helpful?
They were the thoughts.
Yes, very good. Anyone want to speak into the retirement question any more than that?
The other thing that comes up, maybe not as soon as you retire, but in time, the fact that you have, sometimes you have grandchildren, and the family then requires time again and support. From
Yes, yeah.
and if there is a way, it means you have the fact that travel away as well.
Yes. It's hard with grandchildren working out what's work and what's pleasure, isn't it? Both have value, both work and leisure, but it's, yeah. And there's obviously sure. Yes. Yeah, I'm with that. And just as an aside, lots of studies have shown the great importance of the extended family in the development of children. And that extended family might be grandparents, aunties and uncles and so forth. If you don't have those nearby, it's really important to have church friends who can fulfill some of those roles. It's really significant in both child development, but sort of moral development, helping them understand the church community. So grandparenting is part of that, but church family living is part of that as well. So it's really important to factor that in to what you do with your time. Just by the way, let's go back this way. Did you do the limited time one as well? Okay, does someone want to speak into that one? Okay, I haven't got enough time in the morning to read the Bible with my family or on my own or anything else. Do I accept this is a busy season in life? Do I plan some other time to do it? Do I just get up earlier? What? You just got like 3 options, so what was the answer? Well, you got those 3 options.
Oh,
You didn't bother with that?
No.
I might have turned it off. I might have been fiddling with it, sorry. Flick it upwards.
We thought that on a given morning, a bit like other examples you've given, that was all right. But probably scenario 1, on a given Tuesday, it's okay.
Okay.
Not to get too stressed about it. Don't think you're failing, but make a better plan. And as a general rule, to be looking at the big picture and a better strategy for life and to make a plan. And being realistic with your timings and actually work the plan. Don't sort of try it for one day, be working a plan. So you may get up earlier, let's use that as an example to read the Bible, but don't just do it for one morning and think, oh dear, that didn't really work that well, I got a bit stressed and give up. Actually work the plan for a while
Okay.
and not be legalistic.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that at all? It's all a bit of an awkward one, really, because you're all thinking, well, I don't always do that very well, so I can't really speak into this because it's a bit awkward for me because I'm not always doing it.
It is a bit of trial and error because I've done probably all three of those recently. So I got up a little bit earlier to try and read the Bible, and because it was a busy season of life, because it's busy, sometimes I get up earlier and the kids ended up getting up earlier. But then I ended up doing the Bible reading, kind of like 2 chapters in the morning, 2 chapters in the evening, just to kind of catch up in the evening. So it kind of ended up being all three of those things. Really.
Yeah. Okay.
Bit of trial and error, and not got to feel guilty about it. Just try it and see what happens.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, you're kind of seeing that all of these are slightly contrived examples, that it's about deciding priority. If you decide to read the Bible and to pray in some form or other on a regular basis is a priority as part of your kingdom principle, then you've got to figure out when you're going to do it, haven't you? What else can you do? You've got to figure out when you're going to do it. And so these are the practical situations of life that you can't beat your children up, so what are you going to do? Okay, I get really tired by Sunday, and especially in the evenings. This evening I can hardly keep my eyes open. Is that you? Not tonight because it's so cold in here. Shall I go to the church service, sit in front of the telly, do something else? You guys did this one? What did you say about that one? Okay, what were the few things that you said? Anyone else want to speak? No, go on, Kachera. Go for it.
They're very practical examples. When me and Neil first met and started going out, culturally, I've grown up in this church where we from a young age, we went to church twice on a Sunday, and that's the opportunity we had, and that's what we did. Neil did that when he was younger, then his church in his adult life was they didn't have the evening service.
Sure.
Neil, I speak for him. Owning his own business, mentally Sunday night had become a time to prepare and rest in what would be a busy week.
Yep.
And then that situation changes and you accommodate that. And Adam made a good point, I speak for Adam now, that actually are you any less tired if you stay at home and do something different? That might not be wrong, but actually you have an opportunity to come and hear the word being taught, meet God's people. You'll probably be as tired as if you stayed at home and rested. So you could
Yeah. Yeah, good points. You wanted to speak just now, by the way, Nathan, didn't you? You got missed because you put your hand up. Sorry about that.
There's some element of your structural plan to maybe something you do that would mean you weren't really tired by the Sunday. Did you have a last plan for your Sunday lunch, which might make you sleepy in the evening? Possibly. Or that's a very bad example. But there might be other things you're doing on Saturday, cramming everything in, or doing too much work in the week. So, yeah, you're really tired.
Yeah, yeah. I could have used the same example of a Sunday morning, by the way, but it's really helpful to make the point about it's arbitrary. I think I heard this group mentioning it. It's quite arbitrary to say whether we have 2 services or 3 or 1. But I suppose I picked that one because that's the one you're more likely to be tired in the evening than the morning. Some of you are tired all day long, I know, but you know what I mean. Okay, anyone else want to speak into that at all? Yes, there's Nick and then Matthew.
I guess just one thing is it's actually really helpful just to have, although I talked about the risk of habits this morning,
Yes,
just actually having disciplined habits that sort of take some of the decision making out.
yes,
So you're not making all these stressful decisions, but it's actually something to fix.
yeah,
You basically do that. It's actually
Yeah.
fault.
yes,
And you have to have a very, very good reason not to.
yeah,
That actually just makes life a lot easier.
yeah,
Less stress in decision making about what to do.
yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. Tis now.
Okay, cool. Someone didn't want me to speak. Yeah. That's just fair enough. For our group, though, in our group came up with the point that if you really are feeling tired, which people genuinely do, and they probably shouldn't go to services, people fall asleep in these services. Maybe you should stay home and sleep, not just watch TV or do something else like that. So that is a good point because you're preparing for the weekend at work, so you're not at home at work, you're absolutely tired, so that could be a valid alternative.
Yeah, yeah. Most people who fall asleep in the evening service, though, it's not always because they're overtired, but also it's a really rubbish time to go to sleep if you're going to no one's really going to go to sleep at 6:30 in the evening and think this is hell. You know, if you're ill, but no one's really going to go to sleep between. Yeah, sure. But it's pretty unusual, and if you do, you probably won't sleep the night if you fall asleep as early as 6:30. There may be other relaxing activities. I'm just.
It's not like a sinful thing to do if someone's genuinely catching up with sleep.
No, it's just whether it's a wise thing to do because you probably won't sleep the night. That's all. Yeah, having a Sunday afternoon nap. You know, I grew up in a rural household. My dad was a farmer, and it was like normal to have a little 40 winks on a Sunday afternoon. It was the thing to do. And he got up at 4:30 every morning and came to Sunday evening meetings, like full of beans. What can I tell you? Should we do another scenario? Because we're nearly out of time. We've got like 2 or 3 more minutes. Let's do number 2 because that's the last one. Working back. It's a similar one, actually, now thinking about it. But don't we want to speak into that? About, yeah. I didn't realize it was so similar to the other one. But do you want to add anything to that? Okay. Yeah, yes and no. We'll just expand on the yes and no a little bit. Okay. I think to do with Sundays in particular, it's definitely worth thinking about the fact that these are quite rare opportunities for Christians to gather. I know you have opportunities in the week in community groups, but they're much smaller gathering, and the gathering of the whole church, which is possible on a Sunday morning and evening, are very special events in the life of the church, and it's worth just thinking about. What do I need to do to see if I could be there? Of course, there will always be reasons why you can't be there, or there may be a long-term reason why you can't be there for, health reasons or family commitment reasons and all those sorts of things. But I think it's not worth just kind of dismissing out of hand and saying, I just don't do that. I think it's worth thinking, why don't I do that? Should I do that? Why are they gathering twice a day? Why do the church leaders still gather twice a day? Is it kind of habit, or do they think it's a good idea? So should I think it's a good idea? But anyway, in all these examples, it's really just trying to tease out, you will need to make in your lives structural decisions about what you take on in order to make sure you're free to serve your family, to serve in your work, to serve in the church. And they should be reflecting your absolute commitment to building the kingdom of God and your goal of serving Christ in everything you do. And we need lots of wisdom in order to kind of work that through. Let me close by praying, and then you've got opportunity to get out before 8 o'clock. I've just put my drink on my tab, so I'm just moving that a little bit. It's only a little bit of drink, don't panic. Let's pray. I'm going to pray the prayer that Paul prays. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father, who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Amen.